If I had dreamed it, I never could have imagined a Thanksgiving service this beautiful. Thank you, all of you, so much for every piece of it. It is a beautiful day. This week we come to the close of our November series on sacred souls, sacred community, sacred earth. Each season when we turn our thoughts to the breadth and depth and beauty and light of the understanding of Celtic Christianity, my spirit is fed. Celtic Christianity has been for me a way of enriching my belief in the divine and in the sacred flow that is in and through all of life on this earth and beyond. It is a flow that is forever finding its way forward as it explores and unfolds into what has never been before. And yet this flow, I have learned, has the wisdom of the ages in its depths. The Celtic theologian John Philip Newell says, "This flow is the way our souls, our lives, our communities are all made of God in the past, in the future, and in the here and now." Ever since I began to stretch my understanding of the divine through the sacred flow, it has been moving like the current of a river that flows in and through all of my life. I never know where it will take me. I never understand when and why I become acutely aware of it. And I am still surprised when I feel it in my life and when I see its evidence in our communal life together. What I do know is that I have come to trust this sacred flow. Over these past few difficult weeks, I have found myself continually looking and longing for the sacred flow. In an effort to understand more about the flow and the earth itself, I began wondering when and where I first became aware of its existence. I think I began to understand it on a very elemental level as a child. Learning about ancient civilizations and peoples across the world, I was fascinated by the ways they were so closely tied to the earth. They had a sense of place, and as Newell said about the Celts, they knew the earth was theirs, and they were the earth's. So they gently and lovingly took care of their home. On our continents, for thousands of years, the indigenous people reverently worked with the earth to produce what they needed to live. They looked to the seasons of the earth as the rhythms of their lives. And so they listened for and respected the winter snows and the spring rains, the heat of summer and the shortening days of the fall. They listened to the cycles of the days brought by the sun and the moon. They looked to the stars with awe and wonder, and they understood the times and the seasons. These indigenous people knew that the beauty of this world was to be life-giving for all creatures. In their rituals and sacraments, they gave thanks for the earth, which they knew was their home. In one of the saddest portions of history in the Americas, we now know intellectually about the displacement of these peoples. Through conquest and colonization, they were pushed further and further away from their sacred places. And the loss of their land and homes, and often their lives, broke generations of people whose wisdom went far beyond our own. Taking away their homelands and their very lives meant they had to fight to exist in places that were unfamiliar. They had been uprooted and left to find their way alone. Imagine what it might have been like when the people that became the ancestors of this country came to America. If they had come to learn instead of to conquer. This story is reminiscent of another story many of us have heard all our lives. In many versions of the creation narrative from the Bible, the ending of the story gives us a picture of a broken human race being driven from the Garden of Eden, the only home they had ever known. We are told they were driven by a God who was punishing them for their sin. The earth was no longer really their home. They would now be in opposition to all living things, and they would have to fight to secure their place in this unknown and frightening future. Years ago, I read a line that put this in perspective for me when it said, "These stories are very similar. The only difference is who gets to play God." There are so many ways to interpret and often corrupt stories that try to explain the divine and the inexplicable ways the sacred flow is always and forever present. It is possible to make people believe that these things have happened, that these things that have happened are somehow because we are apart from God, when in truth, we are never separate from the love and goodness and grace of God. Never. Celtic Christianity understood this truth, and Newell believes that while the sacred flow is always and forever with us, the only way we can be assured in our spirits of the flow is to become again fully immersed into the sacredness of the earth. The eco-theologian Thomas Berry said, "We have to move from an ethic of alienation from the natural world to a spirituality of intimacy with the natural world." Because we are all interconnected, it is vital for us to realize we do not stand alone out of time and place. We can decide to pretend that if we think and look after ourselves in isolation, that we might get what we need. But perhaps what we need is to realize that the earth's well-being is an essential part of our well-being. So how do we come back to the sacredness of the earth? Newell insists that the invitation for us is to simply let go. Let go into the flow of the one deep within us, the one who is and was and always will be. He says this is the subterranean river of God that courses in and through all things. This sounds so wonderful, doesn't it? And on many days, I believe I can simply breathe into this flow. Yet in reality, it is a big step for each one of us to decide to let go into this sacred flow. One of our biggest questions and major concerns is, where is this river of God taking us? Will we be safe? And when will we know that we are in this flow? Many years ago, some of you have heard me say, I fell into the Papaquai River in Costa Rica. I should never have been on the river that day, never. But thankfully, I listened to the Costa Rican guides very carefully because I did understand the Papaquai was their river. So when I went out of the raft at the top of the first Coffins Rapids, I did exactly what they told me. I did not fight the river. I let it take me down again and again and again. And each time it brought me back up until I had run both the upper and the lower Coffins and their wonderful rapids. With my head finally above water, I could breathe, and I could reach out to the kayaker that was coming for me. Sometimes stepping into the sacred flow in times like we're living in right now means the rapids will be 4s and 5s. Not a pleasant 2 or 3, and certainly not a nice, lazy stream on a warm summer day. We have to trust that the sacred flow of the divine is with us and for us. We have to rely on the ancestors that survived when all reason would tell us they should have died and faded away. Even though they are gone, the stories of their hardship and heartache and resilience still reside in our DNA. And they are still reminding us to step into the sacred flow and know that it will take us all the way home. In the early church, the ancestors believed that when we shared the table with bread and the fruit of the vine, whatever separated heaven and earth would open, and those who had gone before us would be in communion with us. And all of those who loved us and all of those who were not able to love us as they should have are now in their redeemed states, looking at us with love and tenderness, wanting us to know that the earth is sacred and we are sacred. On this day of gratitude, remember above all else, no matter what is happening, because in the vast expanse of time and space, we are all held by the love of God forever and ever. Amen.